This week we have been considering Bart Ehrman's complaint that the New Testament text is so corrupted as to be untrustworthy and certainly not inerrant in any relevant sense. The last group of variants, or differences in the New Testament Greek text, are those that are both meaningful, in other words, they actually change the meaning of the text, and viable, in the sense that they cannot easily be explained away by looking at other manuscript evidence or external factors. This is by far the smallest group of variants or differences in the manuscripts, making up less than 1% of the total. Let's look at a couple of examples. Some manuscripts have Romans 5:1 using a Greek letter called an omicron, creating the word ekamen. Others use an omega, resulting in the word ekomen. Thus the passage could be saying either we have peace or let us have peace with God, depending on this single disputed letter. But how different are the two results? The bottom line is that neither usage contradicts the overall message of the New Testament. Another example is found in 1 John 1:4. Again, a single contested letter means the difference between the passage saying, "Thus we are writing these things so that our joy may be complete," or "Thus we are writing these things so that your joy may be complete." The meaning is certainly affected by the change, but neither translation violates Christian doctrine. In fact, as Wallace argues, whether the author is speaking of his joy or the reader's joy, the obvious point of this verse is that the writing of this letter brings joy. The largest textual variant in the New Testament is found in the last chapter of Mark's Gospel. What many consider to be the best and earliest manuscripts end at verse 8. However, the vast majority of manuscripts add 12 more verses to the text. While scholars continue to debate where the actual ending is to the book of Mark, the point is that no doctrinal teaching or truth is affected by the dispute. Although Dr. Ehrman can point to places in the New Testament text where scribes either purposefully changed the text or allowed errors to creep in, Christian doctrine is not in peril. In his book Misquoting Truth, Timothy Jones writes, "In every case in which two or more options remain possible, every possible option simply reinforces truths that are already clearly present in the writings of that particular author and in the New Testament as a whole. There is no point at which any of the possible options would require readers to rethink an essential belief about Jesus or to doubt the historical integrity of the New Testament." This week we have been considering the integrity and authority of the New Testament in light of popular portrayals of the textual variants or errors in the Greek manuscripts. Today we will reflect on what might be driving the current criticism of the New Testament. There is an old saying that one should not throw out the baby with the bathwater. I feel that this is exactly what Bart Ehrman has done in his book Misquoting Jesus. He first assumes that for the New Testament to be reliable, it must be perfectly transmitted across the centuries. 99% just won't do. He then highlights textual variants that have been known by New Testament scholars for decades and declares that whatever truth within the Scriptures has been lost forever. He seems to have gone from one form of fundamentalism to another. In his earlier state, he held to an idealistic view of the New Testament that was unrealistic and unnecessary. Later, when his ideal view was shattered by a study of the Greek text, he went over to an opposite, equally unnecessary view that the text was of little or no value. As Daniel Wallace explains, it seems that Bart's black and white mentality as a fundamentalist has hardly been affected as he slogged through the years and trials of life and learning, even when he came out on the other side of the theological spectrum. He still sees things without sufficient nuancing. He overstates his case, and he is entrenched in the security that his own views are right. He adds that Bart Ehrman is one of the most brilliant and creative textual critics I've ever known, and yet his biases are so strong that at times he cannot even acknowledge them. It seems that Dr. Ehrman and others have fallen for what has been called the myth of absolute certainty. This myth argues that as time goes by, we are getting further and further from the words recorded in the original New Testament documents. Some use this myth to argue for the supremacy of the King James Bible. Others, like Ehrman, use it to argue for a position of complete despair, claiming that we can no longer pretend to have anything like an inerrant text. It's important to realize that we not only have virtually all the documents that were used for the translation of the King James Bible, but we now have 100 times the number of Greek manuscripts that were available when the King James Bible was written, and over 400 of those manuscripts predate the earliest ones available to its King James authors. If in its most basic sense inerrancy means to tell the truth, we have a New Testament text that is more than capable of accurately conveying the truth that God intended for the church in the first century and today.